to this channel and welcome to this video. I am no longer a teacher with EPIK. That was really weird to say. Now I can say, hi, my name is Courtney. I taught with EPIK for 1 year in the Jeollabuk-do region of South Korea, elementary school, 4th, 5th, and 6th grade, and I have just finished up. I wanted to make this video as a little life update for you guys and also a little explanation for why I am choosing to not renew my contract with EPIK. So I wanted to make this video for 3 reasons. Number 1, if you guys have kept up with me, that's so sweet, that's so kind, and I hope in the future people also are able to watch my EPIK videos and vlogs just to see what life is like in Korea, and so I want to provide an update of why I am no longer there. 2, I also want to give a little bit of an explanation so that if you guys are interested in EPIK, you can kind of weigh these as a pros and cons going in. Just a little bit more knowledge is usually very helpful in making decisions, so take it as you will. And then 3, I'm going to be talking about next steps, so what I will be doing next, and I'm very excited to tell you guys about it. So I'm actually going to continue teaching Korean students, which I'm so pumped about, but now online. So I'm going to tell you guys where I am living now. I am no longer in Korea and what I am doing next. But first, let's get back to the primary point of this video, which is why I ended up leaving EPIK. I'm sure some of you guys out there are like, Courtney, why? Why did you leave? It looked like you were really having a good time. You always talked about how much you enjoyed Korea. Why the change of heart? And I want to say, rest assured, I absolutely loved my time doing EPIK and my year there. Something I want to make really, really clear from the beginning of this video is that with EPIK, you recontract every year. So you only contract for 1 year, and then you have to go, you have to interview, and then do a re-signing for the next year. And that's annual. So I completely finished my contract. I didn't leave early. I just decided not to renew for the next year. So I left because of 2 main reasons, of course. One would be personal and one would be professional. So I'm going to share that with you guys. I'm going to share the personal details just very scantily, I suppose. That's such a weird way to say that. I think I could have said that any other way. I will briefly discuss the personal reasons just because I always want to make sure that this channel is sharing a part of my story, but also helpful for you guys. If you are considering making this step in this move, I want to give you useful information. So of course, I'm going to be talking about why I personally left, but I also want to be talking about the EPIK program in and of itself as well. So I'll start with the personal reasons. There's really just 3, and I'll roll through that pretty quickly and then talk about the EPIK program itself. So first, and this is the main primary reason, as some of you guys might know, I lived in Scotland 2 years ago. And so I lived there and I got my master's degree for 1 year. And then from there, I moved to Korea and I taught in Korea for 1 year. So I had been living abroad outside the US for 2 years. Something to really consider when moving abroad, and I think not enough people talk about, is when you live abroad, especially when it's consecutive years and a lot of them, which I feel like I would be getting up to working into 3 or 4 years abroad, not quite 2, but you miss a lot of things. You miss a lot of birthdays, but you also miss a lot of Christmases. I had missed multiple Thanksgivings now at this point, and even things that are really important, like unfortunately when I was in Scotland, my grandmother passed away, so I missed her funeral. Also, one of my best friends from high school just got married this last spring. Again, unable to attend that wedding. I had multiple family events coming up this year and a lot of really good friends making these permanent decisions to get married and having babies. And I just realized that after 2 years, it had seemed like a while. I felt like I was starting to miss a lot of those moments that I wouldn't necessarily get back. And while I want to pause and say that this should not stop you from moving abroad, I'm very, very happy that I did live abroad, and 2 years was absolutely incredible and amazing. And you can't have other people hold you back, or, you know, again, these impending holidays hold you back from being able to experience what you're really wanting to and experience the world. But I felt like after 2 years trying to recontract for a 3rd year, I didn't know if I wanted to continue missing those things that were really important to me. The second personal reason definitely has to do with my dog. I love my dog. His name is Zeke. I don't think that you guys have met him before, probably. I'll introduce you. I wanted to introduce you guys to Zeke. He's 5 years old this last April. He's such a joy in my life. He is from the Humane Society, so he's a mixed breed, and he's just the best thing ever. Hello. And now you also might be like, whoa, Courtney, why would you come back for a dog. I know that sounds really silly to some people and not so much to other people, especially if you have animals, but once again, this was more of a time thing. I had left my dog with my parents who were kind enough to watch him for the last 2 years, which honestly, not everybody would do that, and that's such a kindness that they would do for me, and they did it with a smile on their face, and I am infinitely grateful for that. But I knew going into a 3rd year that he was my responsibility. I wanted to have him back both on an emotional level, but again, on a responsibility level, and I felt like applying again for a 3rd year wouldn't be a great fit. Now, I know that bringing a dog to Korea is an option, and that is definitely something I looked into very, very thoroughly, but at the end of the day, because my dog is a medium 50-pound dog, it was going to be extremely expensive to actually fly him out to Korea, and then also the housing situation going with that, which I will talk about in my reasons also for actually leaving EPIK, the program. So I'll get to that in a second, but he was a huge contributor. What I want to say about this is if you also have a pet and you're considering EPIK, or just responsibilities like owning a car, honestly, any type of ownership of something, it is really, really nice when people are willing to take care of something, but when it requires maintenance, again, even like a car, oil changes, just maintenance on a car, it has to be driven. You can't leave it just parked for 2 years. When it requires maintenance or an animal, which I'm not saying the two are the same, but you get what I'm saying, you're really depending a lot on other people to continue to do things for you. And I just felt like signing on for a 3rd year, I felt like I kind of reached my max and I wanted to come back. And number 3, I had a couple of familial conflicts that I needed to come back for. And I just wanted to mention that to say that sometimes when you leave and you live in a different country, it's very easy to think that everything back home kind of stays the same and it just stays frozen. But unfortunately, that is not the case. A lot of things change, and unfortunately, whether that be health or well-being of family members, I think it was definitely time for me to come back, and I have a space and a place to come back for those reasons. So for those reasons primarily, I ended up coming back after 1 year of teaching with EPIK. But now I'm going to talk about 3 main takeaways I had from EPIK and reasons that I did contemplate whether I should stay or leave regardless of these personal experiences. So something I want to say really clear from the get-go is just to say that I absolutely loved my time in EPIK. I wouldn't have changed it for the world. If someone asks if they should do EPIK, I would highly recommend it. If you've watched any of my other videos, I'll talk about 10 things I wish I knew before going to EPIK, and these other things and characteristics that I think would be helpful to indicate if you would enjoy the program or not. So of course those things are important as well, but I wouldn't have changed it for the world. I made incredible friends. I absolutely loved my students. I loved my job. It made me smile waking up every single day going to it, and I really enjoyed it. Of course, there are some drawbacks, which I'll be talking about in this video as well, but overall, I am so grateful that EPIK was a part of my life. So the first one, as some of you guys might know if you watched any of my vlogs with EPIK, I ended up working at 5 different travel schools. So my first semester working with EPIK in the fall, because I did the fall 2023 intake, I taught at 3 different schools, but my second semester, starting in end of February or March, I started teaching at 5 different schools. During this work week, I also ended up on Tuesdays going to one school and then transferring midday to go back to the other school. So I ended up actually transitioning to 6 different schools throughout the 5 days. So while I think that if I started with 5 schools, I think I initially would have been like, no, I don't know if EPIK's a thing for me. It could have been very overwhelming. So I'm very grateful that I ended up only having 3 at the beginning and then 5 after I had grown accustomed. But regardless, it was a lot of traveling. And while they do reimburse you and have a travel bonus, it only goes up to 3 schools. So you get a travel bonus if you have 2 schools, if you have 3 schools, but anything above that, you're already capped. So I was then at a point of teaching 5 schools instead of 3, and I wasn't getting paid anymore. And of course, I was spending more money traveling to those schools, which it doesn't seem like a lot, but that's just a lot of time on top of it. So you're not really getting compensated for doing a lot more work. And again, it's outside of just money. Of course, taking the bus is fairly inexpensive in Korea, but some of mine were up to 45 minutes, an hour away by the time I actually got off the bus and walked there. So I imagine some people, you might want to take a taxi, you might try and do a different route. And if that is the case, it's going to be a lot more expensive than whatever the bus is. So it just ended up being a lot of schools because on top of just the transportation, of course, you have to think about co-teachers. So working at 5 schools, I also had to not just work with 5 co-teachers, but some of those schools I ended up working with homeroom teachers. So it was a different teacher each period. Some of them wanted collaboration, other ones did not want any collaboration. So it was a lot to keep straight and a lot of lessons that were supposed to be the same, but depending on what my co-teacher wanted to do, it looked different. So I couldn't just lesson plan for one lesson or two. I had to lesson plan the same lesson, but while accommodating to each teacher and what they wanted at the different schools, which a lot of them were different, some of them were the same. So I think for that reason, teaching at 5 schools was a lot. So this is not something that is a guarantee. If you do EPIK, you're gonna have 5 schools. By no means is that the case. I think it really depends on where you are placed. You could have 1 school or you could have 5 schools. So I just ended up getting selected for the 5 schools. And like I said, I'm very grateful my first semester dipping my toes in. There were only 3, but it just by the end ended up being a lot of different schools, a lot of different co-teachers, a lot of different collaboration to just keep straight. The second part about EPIK that was something that I had to contemplate whether it was worth staying or not is because the Office of Education, which is going to be different for each city you stay in or possibly just province or region, they determine everything. So if they decide to make budget cuts and there are less teachers in the area, or if your Office of Education decides to place you in a different school just because that's what needs to happen at the moment, you have to abide by what the Office of Education says and you don't really have any agency or say in that. Now that's not unusual, that's a lot of different jobs. What the boss says goes. I thought that when I signed in the fall, I would for sure have those same schools and students for the full year, and that's not necessarily the case. It's really up to your Office of Education and what they choose. That is in your contract. It's just one of those things that you should read well. Again, nothing extraordinary outside of any other regular job. I just felt there was very much a lack of agency and you are dependent on the Office of Education for your visa. And unfortunately, that means a loss of relationships with some co-teachers there, and for me, primarily students, which was disappointing. And then the third reason has to do with housing. So as I previously mentioned, I really wanted to bring my dog over. And while the cost of actually flying a medium-sized dog, because they can't stay in the cabin, are pretty expensive, especially if you're talking about from America all the way over to Korea, it's a lot of money. But also on top of that, the housing in Korea is quite an interesting beast to behold. So I'm not going to talk too much about this because I don't want to spread any misinformation or something that is wrong. I am definitely not perfectly informed on the Korean housing market and what it is like, but I will say that with EPIK, they provide the apartment for you. But after you finish your first year, or if for some reason something's really wrong with your apartment, you can find another place and you can get your housing stipend, which is decently generous for Korea. I think for living in Jeonju where we did, there were a lot of different options for the housing allowance we got. Now I imagine that as you get into a bigger city, that you're probably going to find less and less housing for the allowance that they give us. But something I didn't know just about in general Korean renters is the deposit system in Korea. So deposits on apartments can be really high and your rent can be lower. So in the States, which is the only thing I have to compare it to, so if you're from somewhere else, this could be completely normal. And even if you're from somewhere else in the States, this could be normal. It just wasn't for me. Generally, I think about a lower deposit, but then a higher rent. But in Korea, people are placing thousands and thousands of dollars down for their deposit. And I'm talking about huge chunks of money, especially if you're going to be living in bigger cities. And then their rent is a little bit lower. And of course, you don't get that deposit back until you move out. But the thing is that you have to have so much money up front. And a lot of people and a lot of Koreans end up taking out loans. And depending on where you live, those could be massive, those could be small, but they end up taking out loans to put this deposit down. And then of course they pay their rent. And then they'll get it back, and then they'll pay off their loan. But as someone who is a foreigner and not looking to live in Korea long term, that just did not seem like the way to go. And something again I want to make clear is that you can definitely do this. Plenty of EPIK teachers end up finding their own housing. This is very doable. It takes a little bit of knowledge of the real estate in Korea, but this is very doable. My trouble was finding a place with a reasonable deposit that would accept a dog in an area where my medium to large size dog can go to the park and he can roam and just have that space. So as a renter, I was being very picky about where I could bring him because living in Jeonju, it is a city, but I wanted him to have access to be able to have free space. So I was looking for something very specific. So I want to say this to say that for my specific situation, it was doable, but a lot of hoops to jump through. And just for the comfort of my own dog who is able to roam and have a yard here, I felt like it wasn't worth it for him. But if you have a small dog or if you have a cat, or maybe you have a medium-sized dog dog, but you feel like you can take care of them really well in a city situation, maybe you already do, then I don't want to discourage you from doing that. It is something that's doable. Other people do bring their pets. I just found it to be extremely expensive, and for my own pet's needs, it was just a lot to jump through on top of a massive deposit as a foreigner living in Korea. So that wasn't worth it for me personally. So now into the last part of this video, I'll be talking about next steps, what I am doing next, what I am excited to share with you guys. And I also want to say that I will continue to upload and film videos. I know that sometimes there's a couple weeks in between my videos, so thank you guys so much for bearing with me. I'm trying to reacclimate to being back in the US and getting all these job opportunities sorted, but I'm very excited to share it with you guys continuing on into the future. And I also really want to share it, like I said, because I think a lot of us take EPIK as a stepping stone, or sometimes we don't realize that, but we're there and then we contemplate our life very deeply thinking, what am I going to do next? And while EPIK does give you experience, and in order to do EPIK, you have to have your TOEFL, so you have a certification, that doesn't necessarily mean, especially in the States, that you can go back and teach. So because of that, I've actually ended up making the decision that I really wanted to continue to teach, but again, I don't have a specific certification, but I have this experience now. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to end up teaching Korean students online. So I'm really excited about this because I can continue to teach students, which is what I love so much, and also a population that I absolutely adore working with. And then I can also do it out of the comfort of my own home, which is just a plus. So I've never actually worked from home before, so this is a big transition for me. I love being in the brick and mortar classroom. I really enjoyed being in an actual physical school, but I figured because of all these reasons that I've explained in this time in life, that this is a good opportunity to have some flexibility to again still work with this group of students that I absolutely love, and also continue to build up my resume and career moving forward in the teaching sphere. I'm working with a company called Now, which teaches Korean students EFL, so English as a foreign language. A lot of these websites will focus on Chinese students, so I'd love to go into more detail about this, both as a company, but more so also just talking about my own experience transitioning in and what that looks like. So I'm excited to show you guys moving forward what that looks like, and just a potential pivot that you could make if you decided to teach EFL anywhere in the world, but wanted to end up going back to your home country, and how you can try and maintain that. All right, so I think that's enough to wrap up today's video. Thank you guys so much for watching. Again, I want to say, if you have kept up with me and watched any of my EPIK videos, I loved my time doing that. I think it's one of those rare moments that when I'm 70, when I'm 80 years old, I'm gonna look back and think of only absolutely fond memories with the people that I met, the teachers, of course. My co-teachers were lovely, kind, exceptional in every way. And while, of course, there are some challenges while living in a different country, and I've spoken about that before, Korea's forever changed my life. And there's not much more I can say other than I am so grateful to God that He gave me that experience, and it's something I will forever take with me. So thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you have the absolute best day of your life, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.